So this is relatively fresh. This is coming from a bunch of tweets that people have put out for people who have seen Dune at TIFF. The basic spiel is most people loved it, so the vast majority did find something favorable to say about it. But again, we did find a minority of people who didn't like certain aspects of Dune, but it's a very different tone. Whereas I noted with Venice, the reaction was basically from elite critics. A lot of them did like it, but then a small minority really, really didn't like it and thought it was a failure and disappointment. I think overall, it's mostly very positive with Dune, but you did have, again, a minority, but it was slightly different tone. It wasn't that they hated the film or disliked it as much as they were just really confused. That's something that came up over and over again, that they just felt overwhelmed. Now, most of the overwhelming is positive. They were like, wow, there was just so much to see, so many names, so much of the mythology. But some of them were a bit taxed. They felt Denis did not do a good job structuring the story. It could have been much more comprehensible. So there was some negative criticism, which I think is legitimate. I think what bothers me is that the disposition is a bit all over the place from people who say they know the books, they know the mythology, and still say that they were very confused. I'm a little puzzled by that. So, but maybe Denis did make a very confusing film, so the confusion is legitimate. But overall, very positive reaction, and these are slightly different people. Now, with Venice, we got sort of the full-on big critic people. These are still mainly critics and film writers, but they come from like smaller websites. Again, more day-to-day people. I'm not mocking them. I actually did for a long time work for online film magazines, usually not getting paid. I did reviews here and there. Now, most of these are sort of run-of-the-mill film writers and people in the industry. These are, for lack of a better term, like lower-class film critics and writers. And again, I'm not mocking them. I did a lot of online writing on film myself, usually not paid. I'm still waiting actually for payment on one article I did for one film magazine, which will remain unnamed. But we are getting sort of like a mix of film fans, Denis Villeneuve fans, and people who really love Dune, and we're excited to see it. And again, the buzz is mostly positive, though I do think Dune is sort of being criticized for just being a big film. I was reading one article that did like a top 10 list of things at TIFF, and Dune came in very far down the list. And it was really shocking at what they put much earlier in the list, and this was number one and two. And I'm like, I never heard of these films. What is going on here? So I think some critics are unnecessarily sort of stacking the deck against Dune. At least it's still in the top 10, but they're sort of like, well, we're really here to give exposure to the small films and more artistic films. It's still a bit of mixed reception depending on the people's point of view. It's still slightly mixed, but again, mostly positive. Tweets were pretty uniform, and some even revealed some interesting aspects of what will be in the film and what will not be in the film. Overall, it seems like a very major success of debuting at TIFF and being screened for this audience. I did notice, however, that almost none of them gave any real big spoilers, so it seems like they're still being restricted and have to be careful about what they could tweet and could not tweet. So criticism seemed allowed, and some of them were critical, but I guess they still have a relationship with TIFF or in terms of how things work. I did notice, however, the YouTubers within the tweets, people who just do YouTube stuff, were not restricted, and they were much more open about what happened and what did not happen, and we'll get to that. But overall, pretty successful. Most people liked it. Most people had positive things to say, but there were some negative. Criticisms of Denis and what he did with Dune. But almost all of them want the sequel, and they want to see what's going to happen further in the story. But some of them did feel like part one was very taxing, very boring. It was just doing a lot of setup, and they were really waiting for a much better payoff. And that does seem uniform, that sort of what was promised early in the film did not really get resolved by the end of the film. So it does seem like almost everyone is saying that the last third or the final scenes needed a lot more work or just were not what they were expecting or wanted from the film. So that seems to be something almost everyone is honing in on, that there were just problems with the editing towards the end where they just felt really confused and it was just very jarring. And there were. This has been a survey of general reactions from TIFF. Again, I'm concentrating on the tweets. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more actual articles and reviews, but here just going through the Twitterverse. And again, I want to specify that I do have a lot of followers, but the way this Twitter works, you may get people who are favorable or not favorable to what you like tweeting yourself. So I put out pro Dune stuff, so I don't know if I'm getting a full representative sample, but I think I looked at like 30 tweets at least, so hopefully that's a good sample.